So one day, March 9th of 2022, I remember it like it was 4 months ago, I got a message from this gentleman named Thad Darger, and it was an interesting message in that he talked about being an F-117 pilot. So I was like, I better give this guy a call back. I wasn't in town, so when I got back to town, I called him back, and he said, yeah, so I'm going to be heading out to Palm Springs soon. I'm going to be giving a talk, just to be about my life in an F-117 and in this program. And so I was doing some research. I came across your website, and I found out that you have the 817. I'm like, yes, we do. He said, well, I actually flew in that aircraft 13, maybe more times, at least that's what my logbook says. And he said, so I'm actually traveling right now, but when I get back, I'm going to confirm this, but I am 99% sure that I was awarded my Distinguished Flying Cross in that airplane. And I'm like, okay, we got to talk some more. Because as he continued telling me these stories, as we became friends over the last 4 months, I realized that, yeah, his stories are this. It makes up this. We have to find a way to get those stories out more. So here we are tonight, and we hope that we're going to help Thad not only really be inspired by his story tonight, but I hope we can help you amplify your story and the stories of your crewmates, your fellow pilots, because the work that you have done is simply incredible. But my favorite part about Thad is, even though winning the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism means he can officially have the title of hero, I think he's more proud of the title of husband and father and friend, and that is really super cool. So with that, I just want to introduce all to you, Captain Thad Darger.
It's really nice of you to say. Thank you. Wow, so that's a awfully big introduction for this evening. And if you ever decide you're going to speak somewhere, make sure that you don't follow Troy Thrash. That's just a little... that's his first time he's ever spoken in public, so it's really well done. No, that was a wonderful introduction, and it was really wild. I didn't know Troy was going to say that about me at the end, about being a husband and a father, but we'll see a little bit of that as I move into my presentation tonight. And what I want to tell all of you is you're not here tonight to be bored. You're here to learn something. Hopefully you're here to have a lot of fun. And so my plan tonight is to walk you through a presentation and talk to you about the stealth fighter and talk to you about some of the things that have happened in my life. But Troy said it so well already. The concept of this, and to have me standing up here and for you to be looking at a single-seat airplane, it's easy to get caught up in the person. The reality of this, and it goes back to even the restoration crew on this airplane, is everything that happens in the Air Force, everything that happens in a stealth fighter, and we'll talk about it a lot, it's teamwork. It's not a single person. It's not a single airplane. In the 20 years plus that I've been in business, I tell people all the time, if we don't have a team that's doing something, you're not doing anything. One of my favorite expressions is, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with others. And it's true. And so I don't want it to be lost on anybody in the audience tonight that this is a team effort. And again, we'll have some things that come up in the end where you can talk about that. Jack, am I moving or not?
Should be.
I might have to say slide all night long. You're going to have a busy night. So let's go to the next slide. So I put this up. I know these screens are a little bit hard to see. If you want to see it later on tonight, this is really ironic. My wife made me a photo album, which is my most prized possession. It has all these photos, memories from 11 years on active duty in the Air Force. And I went back when I found out I was coming up here tonight, and I looked in this photo album. I only have 2 pictures with nose art, or in the case of a stealth fighter, bomb art. And one of them happens to be Shaba, if you can see it in this picture in the background. And the thing that's so crazy about it is I can tell by the patch that I have on that the picture was taken in 1999 when I was getting ready to fly this airplane in combat out of Italy into Yugoslavia. And so, Troy talked about those small world things, how they come together. The world got really small when it comes to this airplane and when it comes to the experience that I've had over the last 2 days at the Air Zoo. Before I go into the agenda, because it's short, it's been up there, you can see it. I really do owe a huge gratitude and thanks to everyone here at the Air Zoo. I've met a lot of the people that support the Air Zoo tonight. I've met tons of docents and people that have done restorations. Troy and Nikki and Ewan and everyone, they've taken my family around over the last 2 days, and you're all very fortunate to be here and to be at this Air Museum because they do an amazing job. Yes, round of applause. Well done. So I clap for everything, and I cry for almost everything. So if anybody wants to clap, clap, but please don't make me cry tonight. So this is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background, not because I want to talk about me, but it's probably important for you to understand how I ended up standing up here tonight. So I'm definitely going to talk about that. I'm going to spend a short period of time, and I'm going to try to move through it rapidly because I have done this talk a couple of times, and just talk to you about stealth. The principles of stealth and why it's important, why it was important back in the 70s when this was an idea, and why it's even more important today. And so we're going to spend some time going through some of those topics. And then to kind of bring the airplane to life, like Troy was talking about earlier, I'm going to talk about the specifics of how we would attack a target. Because this airplane only carried 2 bombs. If you haven't been up and looked in the mirror that looks up into the bomb bay, we didn't have a gun. We didn't fight air to air. We carried 2 bombs. And so I'm going to talk you through what it was like attacking a target. But then my favorite part, because remember I said you can clap, is that when we get to the end, I have a slide that has about 8 different topics on it. And we're going to go to audience participation, and I'm going to let you pick the topics, and we'll talk about those topics. So without further ado, let's get into it. So background, and I'll speed through this slide kind of quick. So I am the 3rd of 4 generations on my father's side of the family of military. I'll leave my father-in-law out, who's a retired lieutenant colonel, or my brother-in-law, who just retired from intelligence for 20 years as an Army intelligence officer and a lieutenant colonel. But again, I'm the 3rd of 4 generations. And so my grandfather was a Navy Seabee in World War II. My father was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He was shot down 3 times. I always tell people he was awarded 39 air medals. I was awarded 1. So I think my dad should actually be up here speaking, not me. I obviously was in the Air Force for 11 years, had a wonderful time. And then my daughter, the 4th generation, is currently an instructor pilot in the C-17 Globemaster. If you're not familiar with that airplane, it is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. It's an airplane that can back up. It's a huge airplane. It has a HUD out of a fighter. It has a stick, so it flies like a fighter. It doesn't have a yoke. It can land in gravel strips around the world. In fact, my daughter's done that. And this has never happened to me before when I've given these presentations, but it just so happens that she's here tonight, and I love to embarrass my family. So, Captain Darger, if you can stand up for just a second so everyone can see who you are. From this airplane. Somebody asked me the other day on the radio, Ken Lamphere, he said, "Are you a proud father?" And I said, "Just a little bit." She does amazing things, and she helped evacuate Kabul last fall. And so it's amazing how tides turn, and the circle of life is a true thing. There are people like me that talk about flying airplanes, and then we have a new generation that does it every day. So, Alex, thank you to you and all of your counterparts that do what you do. So, went to the Air Force Academy. We don't need to talk about that too much. I spent the 11 years on active duty. I flew B-1s for my first 5 years. I have about 1,000 hours in a B-1. My entire career, for 11 years, I flew T-38s, training aircraft, and I ended up with about 1,300 hours. And then I finished my Air Force career by flying the F-117 and ended up with about 600. Troy, do I stop for a minute or do I just keep on going? 3, 2, 1, perfect. He said it best. It's great to be an Air Force pilot. It's great to be a salesperson. It's great to do all the things that I've done in my life. But it's funny that in the short period of time that Troy knows how much it means to me to be a family guy and to be a husband and everything else. So some quick pictures, because people like pictures if you can see them. That's my grandfather in World War II, Navy Seabee, great guy. That's my dad. I never looked that cool the entire time I was in the military. I don't know what happened, but you can't look much cooler than that. But when I was 26 and I was flying a B-1, I felt pretty cool, right? So I got to do that. And then, thank you, that is very nice of you to say. And then this is right before going out for a combat mission. So these are the 2 bombs that we dropped. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. They're actually just dumb bombs, meaning unguided 2,000-pound bombs, but they had a kit. So we strapped a piece onto the front that had an eye that could open up and look for a laser spot. That was my job in the cockpit. And then there was a tail kit that had 4 fins that jumped out. So the bomb, when I was holding a laser spot on a target, the eye would open up in the last 8 seconds of flight, find that spot, and then the fins on the tail would guide these bombs in. We were the most precise bomber ever built at the time. It was really incredible. And then, like I said, just because I am a proud father, this is, I have 3,000 hours of flying time. My daughter just crossed 2,000. That's what she flies. That's her going into Guam. That's her with my other 2 daughters. Love those pictures. But again, this is the biggest thing for me. In fact, can we get all the Dargers to stand up, all 5 of you guys? I've never been with my entire family before at a presentation. Give me a microphone and look out. That's what I tell people all the time. But no, I'm very proud of my entire family. They're wonderful, wonderful people. And I've also been fortunate enough, my wife's aunt and uncle, Mike and Mary Beth, have come down all the way from Grand Rapids tonight. So thank you guys for coming down and being here. Yeah, Michigan, right? So let's get into it. Let's go through this thing because I've taken up too much of your time already, I think. But let's talk about stealth and why it's important. And we're going to do some very simplistic things. We're going to look at the definition, which always makes me laugh when I see this definition come up. We're going to talk about the concept, and then we're going to talk about Skunk Works, the company that built a stealth fighter. And before I put these 5 things up, they're going to build on the next slide. Does anybody know, and again, I love participation, what do you have to do? There's 5 things that I think you have to do to make an aircraft stealthy. And does anybody know what they associate with stealth or what one of those things might be? Anyone? Radar, very good. So and what we'll say, and we'll get into that, is that's the number one thing that people think, right? Radar cross-section, RCS, meaning you need to look small in radar. That's one. Does anybody? Heat signature, that's great. That is going to be the number 2 thing that comes up. So speed could be one, but I don't have that one listed, but thank you. Electronic emissions, which is the 5th one. You can say wow, because no one ever gets that one. So this person's making me nervous right now. So the shape goes into the radar cross-section, very good. So to keep it moving, so the ones that we didn't touch on were sight and sound, right? So you guys called them out right. Radar cross-section, heat, sight, sound, and then the CIA person that called out electronic emissions that's sitting in this second row. All right, so there they are, just so that you think that I'm not kidding you about these things, right? So let's get into this definition. And again, I know it's hard for some of you to see the screen, so I love this. So I just went on the internet and I said, I'm going to go to Merriam-Webster and I'm going to look up the definition of stealth. And what's it going to say on the internet? And when I saw this definition, I couldn't believe it. And I'll read it to those who can't see it. It says, a cautious, unobtrusive, and secretive way of moving or proceeding intended to avoid detection. That's pretty cool. But when you look at number 2, it says, an aircraft design characteristic consisting of oblique, angular construction and avoidance of vertical surfaces that is intended to produce a very weak radar return, usually used before another noun stealth bomber, stealth fighter, stealth aircraft, stealth technology. Now, people probably think that I made that up and doctored it. Go home tonight, go to that website, and check it out. That's what the definition of stealth is. The way that stealth technology came about, too, is just mind-boggling to me if you read about it. So in 1964, a Soviet mathematician wrote a paper, right? 64, what is it, 60 plus years ago, or 50 plus years ago. And what it showed in the second bullet, it says, the strength of a radar return from an object is related to its edge configuration, not its size. So the Soviet mathematician writes this paper, puts it in a drawer, it gets published in a couple of things, and people ignore it. No one has any idea what's going on. So you fast forward through the end of the 60s, and what happens is as we're coming out of the Vietnam War, and then as the Israelis are fighting the Yom Kippur War, what people start to realize is that these SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, the big missiles that get shot up, the radars associated with these SAMs are becoming very, very good, to the point where it's very hard to avoid them or get away from them. And this is experienced by both our Air Force, and then we watch the Israelis go through this. And so people say, look, we don't want to be vulnerable to these surface-to-air missile systems. We don't want to be vulnerable to radar. And so these brilliant people at the Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, that created this airplane and the SR-71, they said, one of their engineers gets a hold of this paper from this Soviet mathematician, and they're like, look, we think we can make this work. Meaning he wrote about a concept, we think we can make it practical. And so unbeknownst to anyone, we start this project about the stealth fighter. In 1975, it's proposed as the Hopeless Diamond. They go out, they build a very small model. The story goes that they throw it up in the desert out in New Mexico. They shoot radar at it. And when they shoot the radar at it, they're like, oh, the model must not be working, and the radar's not working. We can't see anything. Let's make sure the radar's right. And then a bird lands on top of the model, and they're like, why is this bird standing in space? And someone's like, oh my God, this works. So in 1975, they go to Congress. This is all in secret, and they propose this program. They build these airplanes. The first flight happens in 77. They build like 3 or 4 of these that are about 3/4 of the size. I think either 2 or 3 of them crashed. But the whole concept of it was that it worked, right? That's the amazing thing about the United States and the companies that build these airplanes. And then they approved the program in 1978. They're doing everything in secret. I normally don't talk about this, but they use parts from all different airplanes. The stick in there is from an F-18. The multifunctional displays are from an F-18. There's C-130 parts. Why are they doing all of that? Because this is all happening in secret, and they don't want to recreate all of these things. I was talking to one of the restoration people today. Supposedly this is the gear off of an F-15. That doesn't surprise me. I'll say yes. But they build this thing, and then they fly the first stealth fighter in 1981, and over the course of the next 9 years, they build 59 airplanes with a radar cross-section of 1/1000th of a meter. It's the equivalent of like a sparrow. Ewan put that out the other night. What's it look like, a bird or a pig or whatever? A bird. So we built 59 of about 6 a year. Remember, the program started in 75, and then in 1988, that's when the defense secretary came on the TV and said, hey, look, we have this airplane, it's called the stealth fighter. So that's a quick background on the concept and where it came from. So let's talk about the principles of stealth. And again, I'm going to move through these rapidly so we can get to the last topics. And you can ask any questions. I'm stealthy. So when we talk about the radar cross-section, you guys called this all out. We talked about the shape. We didn't talk about the RAM. RAM stands for radar absorbent material. There was a skin that was glued onto the outside of this stealth fighter. And a lot of people think that the skin had to do with the fact that you couldn't see it on radar. The reality of it is, and we'll see this in the next couple of slides, it was primarily based on the shape, right? There was never an airplane invented. There isn't a single round surface on this airplane. If you look at the back of the nose door or the front of the bomb base, it's all what we call a sawtooth design. Even the canopy, on the front of the canopy, there isn't anything rounded, right? And so It's the shape, it's the radar absorbent material, but the material only did about 10%. The shape did the other 90%. And then the engines actually help make it really stealthy. So this is the concept. So when a stealth fighter is flying, I think the easiest way for people to imagine what the shape did is that the bottom of the airplane essentially was like a mirror. Whoops. So a radar energy would come up, hit the bottom of the airplane. You think of a mirror, and it would reflect away from its source. Every facet, they call it faceted, almost like a diamond, every shape of this thing was made to deflect energy away. So that had to do with the shape. We talked about this radar absorbent material. Again, hard to see on the screen, but there's individual, this is a current picture of a stealth fighter. There's individual pieces that were glued on. This one's missing pieces that you can see here. That material gave us 10% of the stealthy capability that we had with the airplane. That's a blow up of it. And then these are 3 pictures of 3 different kinds of engines. So most airplanes reflect radar energy the most because of engines. So if you can imagine this, whatever it is, 777 engine or 737 engine on the left, when radar hits all of those fan blades that are on the front, it reflects back to the source. That's how they track airplanes. The second engine's an F-117, where you see a very long intake, which is made to negate some of that reflection. And then you look at this crazy thing that these brilliant engineers did with this stealth fighter, and they put what we used to call a waffle grid over the front intake so that radar energy couldn't come in, go in, hit the engines, and then get pushed back out. This looks really cool. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. It's extremely inefficient for an engine because jet engines are made to bring in as much air as possible. Sorry, that was me. Compress it through all these different fan blades and then push it out as thrust. When you cover up the front of the engine, that's good for radar detection, but not that great for thrust. So heat, somebody called that out right away. Excellent. These guys have the best demo. I met the gentleman that built this earlier so that you can go up and see what they did on the back of this airplane. The back of a stealth fighter is the most novel thing that's ever been created. So this is the first airplane I flew, a B-1. And when we were in Afterburner, those flames would be like 35 feet long. There are heat-seeking missiles that love that, and I mean love it, right? So what do we do with the stealth fighter? They took what they call a platypus exhaust. They spread the exhaust out over about 16 feet. The exhaust, when you get up there, I might just take this off. I have a loud voice and just do it the way I do. It's about 18 inches tall, and the whole idea is instead of having a pinpoint heat source, the idea is to spread out the exhaust. Can I just try to help? Am I on? Yep. He said there was some kind of strange interference, and I said, that's me. So we have this platypus design. If you haven't looked at it, look at it. It's super cool. It was spread out across 16 feet. It was very narrow. And then there are actually ceramic space shuttle tiles that were on the back. So the exhaust, which was pushed up towards the airplane, when you were underneath it, the exhaust was hidden. It was spread out, and then it was sent over space shuttle tiles so that when we would get out of the airplane, you could touch the back of the airplane. It wasn't hot. Just amazing. You'll never see another exhaust like that again. Not good for efficiency and thrust when you're flying an airplane, but great for being stealthy. And then somebody talked about sight or being able to see it. Normally I ask people, what do they painted? People say pastel grays, pastel blues. The reason they do that is to make them blend into the sky, like the two you see in the upper right, when they're not up against a fake background. Does anybody know the only time of the day that stealth fighters were made to fly/fight? Thank you. And so how much sense does it make that we painted them pure black? Brilliant, right? I could have done that. We didn't need engineers for that. And then sound. I don't even put anything up for that, right? If I can hear you, if you hear an afterburning airplane or that Citation or whatever that just came in, they're loud. Because of our exhaust, we were a relatively quiet airplane, but it is important and something that you have to keep in mind for being stealthy. And then finally, we get to emissions. And he was brilliant when he said what he said. Emissions have to do with anything that comes out of the airplane. If I talk on the radio, that's leaving my airplane. There are passive systems that can pick that up. If I have a radar, like when we watch Top Gun or whatever, and I'm scanning for other airplanes or looking for weather, that can be detected by passive systems or by other systems. In the stealth fighter, we would actually do a stealth check after we had refueled and before we went into combat. And one of the things that we would do is we would retract any antennas that were sticking out of the airplane. Can you move me to the next slide, Jack? So those are the antennas. They're sticking out. They're not good for radar cross-section. They were great for talking when we had to communicate with people and things like that. But when we would go into combat, we would retract those. We didn't have any kind of radar on the airplane. People used to always say, how did you know, like, if a missile was coming out of the up at the airplane? And I'd go, well, I'd just look out the window and I would see it. And they were like, well, you didn't like get a warning or anything? And I'd say, no. And then people would say, well, if you saw that, what would you do? And I always said, well, I'd just lower my seat and pretend like I didn't see it, right? Because you don't maneuver in a stealth fighter. The whole concept of stealth is you stay in the trajectory that you're on. And so it was pretty crazy. But you guys all did a fantastic job with those principles of stealth. We talked about them all. The thing that we didn't talk about at the beginning is that without one of those 5 things, meaning you have to have them all, it's not an and or I should say it's an and, it's not an or. If you don't have all 5 of those things, you're not stealthy. The Russians just built a new jet and they're flying around. It looks really cool, it's stealthy, except it has engines from the 1980s. It's not stealthy, right? And these things that we did, and I shouldn't say we, the things that the people at Lockheed did, these geniuses at Skunk Works, to do that exhaust, to have this kind of a shape, to be able to cover the front of the engines like that and still make the engines work, it's brilliant. It's one of the most amazing things from an engineering standpoint that's ever happened. And when this airplane was unveiled in 1988, you didn't see the Russians flying around in F-117 because they couldn't make any of this stuff work, right? You never saw another airplane like this. So let's talk about attacking a target real quick before we get to the end. So I said we only had 2 bombs. Our job was to go after targets. I tell people all the time that, you know, as a lay person, or even before I went to the stealth fighter, I thought, oh, okay, so we're going to attack a target, right? We're going to hit this hangar. We put the crosshairs on the hangar and we hit the hangar. No. The way that we flew a stealth fighter, and we were so precise that someone would pick like an air conditioner on the top of this building, and we would attack the air conditioner. When we were doing training missions in New Mexico, we'd always fly 2 goes a night. So we'd launch 8 airplanes at like 8 o'clock at night, and they'd come back, and then we'd send the second go at like 11 o'clock at night. And when the first pilots would come in, because someone would be in charge of making all the training targets and everything, I'd look at somebody and I'd say, hey, how was it tonight? Was it easy or was it hard? And somebody would be like, oh, Thad, everything's a doghouse. When they said everything's a doghouse, that's what they meant. When we practice, we'd be flying across some huge neighborhood. We wouldn't be dropping things, obviously, but we would have to we'd have to count 16 houses down, find a little tiny doghouse in someone's backyard next to a tree, and say, okay, that's what we're going to attack tonight. Meaning we weren't a general bomber. We were the most precise bombing platform that had ever been created. I always write bomb deliver. I don't want to deviate too much right now, but if I wrote bomber, then all the fighter pilots that flew a stealth fighter would all like, oh, we weren't a bomber, we were a fighter. Luckily, I'm a bomber guy. That's when my head's normal size. It's not oversized. Because I was a bomber pilot, not a fighter pilot. And so we were the most accurate bomber ever created, or bomb deliverer, because, again, I don't want to offend my friends too much. I said this the other night. It's true. It's the concept of stealth. We went places that other airplanes couldn't go. It was the whole concept, right, that came out of Vietnam, that came out of the Yom Kippur War, because they started using radar and surface-to-air missiles to heavily defend something, obviously, that they didn't want attacked. And so the stealth fighter, because of its design and because of its low radar cross-section and all those other 4 things that we talked about, we could go to places that our brethren that were flying at the time, F-15s or F-16s, they couldn't go there because they weren't stealthy. And it gave the US a capability that no other country had, because essentially nothing was safe. And that's a very nice advantage to have if you happen to find yourself in war, which again, without getting on another tangent, the fact that it's 2022 and that time 1999, and the fact that human beings still kill other human beings, we can discuss that over a beer because that's outrageous. I'm serious. 2 bombs, laser guided. We talked about them. We talked about how they work. They've got the eye. They've got the fin kits. They do what they do. We're in level flight. So a lot of times people say, oh, did you have another person in the airplane? No. Well, what were you doing? We had a 3-dimensional autopilot. 3 dimensions means it controlled our altitude, it controlled our heading, and then it also controlled our airspeed if we got close enough. Our jobs were to look at a screen that was giving us an infrared image. We had a little joystick on the 2 throttles on the left, meaning it was just this indented round thing. And we would place the crosshairs on a target because the airplane was flying itself. And we would just keep the target there so that when our laser fired from our airplane, it happened automatically. That crosshair, that target designation was perfect, and it was. There's a million things that we can talk about the stealth fighter that's just unlike any other airplane. This automation of the doors and bombs always blew my mind. So when the bomb bays were open like that, we didn't look like a Sparrow anymore. We look like a B-52, if you happen to know what that is. I mean, that's perpendicular to our airplane. That's insane, and it's huge, right? The stealth fighter was so smart with this 1970s technology that as we came into the target, most fighters, you would push a button or pull a trigger on the stick and something would happen. The gun would fire, a missile would launch, a bomb would fall. In the stealth fighter, and again, my fighter pilot friends hated this kind of stuff, I was like, look, we don't have a pickle switch that drops something. We have a consent switch. I'm going to give the airplane permission to drop these bombs, assuming that all the appropriate switches are flipped. So we'd be coming into the target. Everything would be set. We would see on our display, it would say 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. And what would happen is I would push a button that was on the stick. And again, that's that button I called the consent switch. And what would happen at a very precise point in space, because the airplane was using that laser, if you're all familiar with science, Troy's big on that, Pythagorean's theorem, right? You take the hypotenuse is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It would laze the target, and when we get to the exact precise point, if I had that button pushed, without me doing anything, if I was dropping both bombs, the bomb bays would open, and as soon as they touched in the middle, both bombs would automatically release, and the minute the bombs passed the bottom of the doors would automatically close themselves. So those doors were open for like a half of a second. It was click, click, and that was all done automatically. It was done to make us stealthy. And again, just insane technology that anybody could even figure that out. I liked it though. So we're going to go over this. So we would get images. I was talking to an intelligence expert earlier tonight that was here. And we would get these images. We never knew where they came from. And we would have 8 by 10 pieces of paper, and we'd have 3 images. We'd have an overview, we'd have a medium, and then we'd have a blow-up of the target area. These are going to be color images, but I recreated something to give you an idea. The concept was to take these images, and we would look down at the screen that was providing this infrared image, so it was based on heat. It was only in blacks and whites and variations of that. There were gray tones to it. We would look at the image, and based on our GPS and where the crosshairs were, we would say, look, am I on the right target? And so to give you an example, and again, I'm sorry that these screens are kind of hard to see. This is an example of maybe an overview. This is a city out in California. And when I would look at the first image, I would say, wow, okay, there's a lot going on right there. Are my crosshairs anywhere near where they needed to be? And what we would do is we were trained to see things that were unusual. So in this image, if you can see it, there's a runway in the upper right-hand corner. There's a green spot that's at the bottom of the crosshairs, which I'm 99% sure is a golf course. Because every night when we'd practice on like 16 different targets, I'd be like, that looks like a cool course. That looks like a cool course. I couldn't really see them, but anyway. So we would say, hey, are my crosshairs in the general area? Yes, they are. So then, as we got closer, we would switch over to this medium image. So here I am looking at the screen. I'm looking at a piece of paper in the cockpit. I got a little eyebrow light on. I'm looking at a piece of paper, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's that same thing. Now, what's unusual here? I have this little office park area off to the right. I'm in the third block down, 2 blocks over from this office park area. I've got a curved road coming out of the bottom. Oh, and look, the road dead ends on my target spot. It looks like I'm right in the middle of the block. I'd be like, okay, I'm in the right area. And then this is the blow up. So when I would see this, I'd be like, there's that air conditioner I'm supposed to hit, or this elevator thing on the top of a barracks in downtown Yugoslavia. I'd be like, I need to be 4 houses over for the right, also 4 houses over, it looks like, from the left, but more importantly, I've got this weird pool in the back to my left, and so that's what we were doing. We would process these things. Now, the cool thing about Train the Way You Fight is everything I ever did in my training was 1,000,000 times harder than anything I ever did in combat. And that's cool. That's the way it should be, right? You don't want it to be in reverse because then somebody's going to get in a lot of trouble. But this is the way that we would train in the airplane. So amazing. So I hate to use words like 99%, but I'm 99% sure that this was one of the attacks that I made the night I won my Distinguished Flying Cross in this airplane. And what this is this is a petroleum plant. I am on 3 what we called cracking towers. I don't even know what that is. Is anybody in petroleum here? Okay, here we go again. Catalytic cracking towers. So there was something that were very, very vital to making fuel and doing this. So the concept here is that I found this target. My crosshairs are on the center cracking tower. And again, it's very hard for you to see, but at the top it says auto fire. So my laser's on already. So let me see if this plays. The bombs will always come in from the bottom. They'll always come in from the bottom. And that's what we would do. That's it. Game on. I found another video. This isn't me. The image is kind of tough. So this is a phone image of a VCR tape. You guys remember those? I do. I was around in 1999. But this, I love this. So not only were we accurate in what we did, meaning did we always hit the target, we were precise to the second. We would train every night with other stealth fighters coming into a target area. We were always what we called off axis. You never had them stacked coming in together. They would be like perpendicular to each other. This strike is so cool because just watch, and again, the image is kind of bad, but that's not why we're watching this. Watch the precision of when these 2 bombs hit from 2 different airplanes. The second target's up at the top. I don't know if you guys could see that. We always used to say the joke in the stealth fighter community from the first Gulf War, because nobody ever knew you were there. You know, the name Shaba, somebody said it meant phantom. I always was told that in Arabic it meant ghost. And the story I always held in the stealth fighter community was that when stealth fighters would come over and you couldn't hear them, you couldn't see them and nothing, then everything would start blowing up and that people would be like, Shaba, Shaba, ghosts, ghosts. The joke, but it's not a joke, is the way you really screwed your buddy was you showed up 5 seconds early and dropped your bomb, and then everyone starts shooting as your friend's coming over the top of the target, which doesn't sound funny to me at all. It sounds kind of deadly. I didn't ever do that to anyone. But here, we're going to watch the same thing, but in slow motion. And again, I know that these screens are hard to see, but you can see the top bomb in the air. Can you replay that for us one more time at the bottom? The first bomb's going to come in from the lower left-hand corner that's going up there. Yep. And it's just the fact that we could do this. So we would leave, boom. When we would go into the country, 8 of us would go in on any given night, and the minute we crossed into country, we all went solo. right? It wasn't a good idea to be flying around with someone else. We'd all break up. We'd fly these weird routes where we were overlapping on each other and stuff, and then we'd come back together in some instances and do this. That kind of technology based on things that were developed in the 70s, standing here today in 2022 blows my mind. Sorry. So, this is the fun part. Troy, how am I doing on time, by the way? Will you give me the, hey, Thad, you're done?
You got like 4 more hours.
It's funny, Troy and I met each other, like he said, 4 months ago. Not only do I love him, but I think we're brothers. So these are cool things that you guys get to talk about. I'm going to open up to you guys. There's one topic that my wife always thinks is the coolest topic, and I actually built some slides for it. So if we don't get to it, it's going to get forced into the presentation, because I've learned one thing in 33 years, and that's to keep her happy. And I don't know if I've done it or not, but it's been 33 years. Who wants to call out the first topic? Go ahead. So that's the one that my wife calls out all the time. See, she's clapping for you right now. Congratulations. He works at the museum. That's why he's so good at what he does. Yeah, there you go. So let me see if I can fast forward us there, because I'm going to have to. Okay. So it's not as important that the stealth fighter got shot down, but I will say this. There was only one stealth fighter ever shot down in combat. The stealth fighter got shot down on the 5th or 6th night of the combat operation in Yugoslavia. Ironically, one of the topics was like, what's it like to fly 13.9 hours in a stealth fighter? I flew the airplane that got shot down nonstop from New Mexico to Italy, almost 14 hours to start the war. So on the 5th night of the war, through 3 different things that I won't expand on a lot because it's not as important for this part of the story, through some complacency, meaning we were being predictable as the military, because the Serbians had modified this missile system called an SA-3 GOA, they had modified some of the modulation in the radar. And I'm a civil engineer, so when I go like this, that's all I know about radar. But they had modified it to better see a stealth fighter. And through luck, and luck's in all of our lives, and people that don't acknowledge the luck that they've had, that happens a lot with CEOs and stuff. No offense if there's any CEOs in the audience. But anyway, through complacency on our part, their modification, through luck, they shut down a stealth fighter. Luckily, because that guy flew for the United States, he lands on the ground. First of all, when he ejects, he pulls out a radio while he's at like 10,000 feet, and you don't want to be in a shoot for 10,000 feet, but I think he was. He calls a Kansas Air National Guard tanker and says, hey, mayday, 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 I've been hit. It's Vega 3-1, I'm out of the airplane. Lands on the ground. He's on the ground 40 miles from Belgrade. That'd be like getting shot down 40 miles outside of Washington, D.C. So you think that some other country is going to come in 40 miles away from Washington, D.C. and get their pilot? Say no, because that's never going to happen. We did that. Guy was on the ground for 8 hours. We flew in a whole bunch of special forces guys, because that's what we do, and we got this guy out. But here's the cool part about the story that my wife loves, and I do too, is that he gets shot down, right? There's the airplane laying upside down in the middle of a field. He gets shot down. Remember I said it was 8:06? Does that tail look familiar? It's his canopy. So he gets shot down, he survives. And can you find a better looking Air Force pilot than this guy? Every time I see his picture, his name's Dale Zelko. He flew the stealth fighter in the first Gulf War. He was lieutenant colonel. He had like 3% body fat. He went to the gym every day. And then to top it all off, he was our life support officer. So he taught you what to do if you got shot down. Here's how you work your GPS. Here's what you say on the radios if you're under your chute in a Kansas Air National Guard tank. He taught us that stuff. So here's the guy that got shot down. So he didn't want the publicity of being that guy, meaning he didn't want the media and everything. So his name was secret for about 5 years. The Air Force releases his name after Colonel Zelko says it's okay. They release his name. And a year after they release his name, the guy that was running the missile battery that shot him down emails him. Says, I shot you down. And Zelko emails him back. He's like, you shot me down? The guy's like, yeah, I shot you down. So this is Zelko, that same picture. This is the guy that shot him down, the Serb. This gives me goosebumps talking about it. These guys are like, look, we're just doing our job. I'm a stealth fighter pilot. Remember when I said it's ridiculous that people hurt each other and kill each other in 2022? Zelko's like, I'm just doing my job. This other guy, I'm sorry, I don't know his name. I should. He's like, wow, that's weird. I was just doing my job. And they're like, well, maybe we should get together and talk about it. We should point at where you drilled my airplane. We should go to the museum in Yugoslavia where you have my ejection seat and my helmet and everything else, and we should pose in front of the canopy, and I shake your hand because you blasted me out of the sky. Maybe we should play basketball together in New Hampshire. No, I'm serious. I'm not making any of this stuff up. They see each other once a year. They've made 2 documentaries. The first picture that I showed you of them together, that's from the documentary that you can look up online. You can watch the movie about these guys. But it's so amazing because, well, and here's the coolest thing. So my wife and I are walking through the St. Louis airport 3 years ago when I'm taking my son to college. I'm walking through the airport, right? He gets shot down in 99, and now it's whatever, 2019 or 2020. So it's only been like 11 or 12 years. I'm walking through the St. Louis airport at 8 o'clock in the morning. I looked at him and I was like, I nicknamed him Sugar D. We'll talk about that later, but I go, Sugar D? And he turned around and looked at me and he was like, draft? And so we posed together for a picture. My wife took that of the 2 of us together in the St. Louis airport. But yeah, so that's a stealth fighter gets shot down and the pilot becomes best friends with the guy that shot him down. And it really is a cool story about humanity, right? It's a cool story, not to take away from anybody in this audience that served in the military and, you know, obviously the aggression that you have to feel against another country and everything else, but the fact that they can come together and do what they did is really an inspiring story. So let's race back, and I'm sorry I have to do it this way because I didn't put in slides. Who wants another topic? Anyone?
Flying it for 13.9 hours.
Flying it for 13.9 hours. So I love to tell this story. So you don't fly single-seat airplanes for 13.9 hours. That's insane, right? If you're flying an F-16 and you're going to Europe, you fly over to Virginia, you go out, you have a nice meal, maybe you drink a beer, you get up the next morning, and then you fly across the Atlantic, right? Stealth fighters, super secret in 1999. We get ready to deploy over for the conflict in Yugoslavia. And they're like, look, just for a lot of logistical reasons, we're not going to stop. We're going to fly straight through. I'm like, what? They're like, yes. I said, how long is that going to take? They said, I don't know, roughly 13 and a half to 14 hours. So people ask me all the time, they're like, what's it like to fly a single-seat airplane for 13.9 hours? And I say, it's always an easy conversation. For the 3 days leading up to the flight, you go on what's called a low residual diet. Anybody want to know what that is? Normally someone laughs. So you don't want to go to the bathroom when you're sitting in a single-seat airplane. So a low residual diet just makes it so that you don't eat fiber. And the easy way, because I'm a simple kid that grew up in South Dakota, is our flight surgeons used to say to us, look, if you want to make sure that you don't have a bowel movement, it's really simple. Don't eat anything that's good for you. Berries, lettuce, peaches, stuff like that. Anything that's bad for you, donuts, cheese, steak, eat it for like 4 days leading up to the flight. I'm like, great. So we go on a low residual diet for 3 days. 6 months before that, even though it hadn't happened since Vietnam because of some addictions, we got to test fly no-go or go pills, which is code for speed. I've been out of the Air Force for 25 years. So we'd go home on the weekends and our flight docs would be like, hey, take these pills. And if you start freaking out, don't take any more, but see how they affect you. And we were like, okay. So I take the pills. I'm like, okay, I'm good. So I'm on the low residual diet. I've driven or did a test drive on my go pills. We show up, we get in the airplane, we take off. Every 2 fighters has a tanker, so the first 4 of us take off, 2 tankers, 4 fighters. We start playing Trivial Pursuit. We're doing all this stuff in the airplane. And because we had a whole bunch of reporters on the tankers, my squadron commander, best leader in the world, Gary Waltring, says, hey guys, I don't want to announce on the radios, let's take our go pills. So Waltring says, when I say let's have a cup of Joe, I want everyone to take a cup of coffee. I want everyone to take a go pill, and then we'll be on the same schedule of doing this like every 4 hours. So he goes, okay, let's take a cup of Joe. And so, pull out pills, 4 stealth fighters, we take them. And all of a sudden I hear one of my buddies go, I just dropped my Joe, okay? We're in the airplane. We have on what's called poopy suits because of that residual diet, which is a code for a dry suit, rubber neck, rubber sleeves, survival vest, 9mm pistol. You have a 5-point harness, 1 between your legs, a normal seat belt, 2 chest straps. And then if you want to try this tonight, just go to your kitchen table with your oak chair and just sit there for 14 hours, right? In a dry suit, sweating with a 5-point harness on. But he says, let's take our go pills. Guy calls back, says, hey, I dropped my go pills. Start flying across, 6 hours go by. It's night, we're refueling, we're doing all this stuff. We're playing Trivial Pursuit with the tanker to keep people awake. And all of a sudden, the sun comes up, and I hear this guy, Bill D. Benedictus, and he said, hey, can I get cleared off? I want to try to get my Joe. I'm like, what's he doing? And I look over, and I see this stealth fighter over the Atlantic, and it just pitches over and starts diving towards the water. I'm like, what's he doing? So he pulls up, and when he gets like right next to where we are, he pushes over on his stick, which for non-flyers in here gives you what's called negative G's, right? It's like being an astronaut. And all of a sudden, as he comes flying by me, I can see his hand going like this. These pills are like this big. They're tiny. And I can see him grabbing it, and I can see him kind of floating in the seat and stuff. And all of a sudden, he levels off, and he comes back down next to us. I'm like, hey, did you get your pills? Did you get your Joe? And he goes, no, I didn't get them. I'm like, oh, man. And I look over. He starts diving down towards the water again. And I call my squadron commander, and I go, I think I want to drop my Joe. I want to go do that for a little while. This 9 hours of level flight sucks. But anyway, we flew him 13.9 hours. Last thing on that, it's not the longest flight, but I have to be somewhere in the top 1% of longest flights in a single-seat airplane, because you would never do that in a million years. My daughter does that. I've been in much longer flights than that in a B-1 bomber, but in a single-seat fighter, you don't do it. And I said this the other day, it was fun doing it once, but if anybody would ever ask me to do it again, I would have said no. So that's what happens when you fly a stealth fighter over to Italy to start a war. I think we're going to do one more topic. 2 more topics, Troy? You tell me. Oh, we got one back here. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out. No, it was really weird for me. So, we talked about fighter pilots. When this airplane was secret, and I am going to cover one other topic, 2 other topics because it's really important, but I'll do it quick. So the way they originally did is when the airplane was secret, when no one said that we had them for over 8 years, what they would do is they would bring people into a hangar, the best fighter pilots in the world at the time. They'd bring them in and they'd say, hey, look, we're going to show you something. If you want to fly this airplane, you can fly it, but here's the rub. You're going to be stationed in Las Vegas, and we're going to say that you're flying something else, and you're going to get on an airplane on Monday. I talked to somebody here that had done this. You're going to get an airplane on Monday. You're going to fly up to a secret base, fly these airplanes. You're not going to see your family all week, and then on Friday, you're going to fly back on a 737. It's like a 15-minute flight. And you're going to tell them that you're doing something else, and if you want to do it, you can do it. And if you don't want to do it, you were never here. And I don't know if anybody ever turned it down. Somebody asked me that today. That's how they did it with secret. When it came out of being secret in 1988, the only restriction on it was that you had to fly another airplane first, meaning you couldn't get one out of pilot training. And the other thing was that it was all fighter pilots. So when I flew the airplane, if there are airplane people in here, we had F-117 pilots and F-4 pilots and A-10s and F-16s and F-15s, both models. We had everyone known to mankind. My deal was a little bit weird, and again, I don't want to make this about me, but for me, because I was a B-1 pilot, a bomber pilot, I applied to something that was called the Fighter Bomber Crossflow Program, where they would so everyone wasn't siloed into you're just going to fly a transport like my daughter, or you're just going to fly a fighter, or just fly a bomber. They had a program where they'd let people switch back and forth. Well, I was one of 4 B-1 guys that were picked in 1996 to crossflow into a fighter. And the really cool thing about it, one guy went to an F-16, one to an A-10, and then 2 of us ended up being my best friend, Ken Tatum. We were B-1 guys, and we went to the stealth fighter. I'm in a job, and I get this phone call from the Pentagon because I'd submitted all my paperwork, and I said, hey, if I get a fighter and if I get picked for this, I want an A-10 first, then I'll take an F-16, because they wanted you to rank order the airplanes. And so I'd rank ordered like 6 fighters. And I'm at this pilot training base, and I'm flying a T-38. And somebody says, hey, Darger, someone from the Pentagon's on the phone for you. And I'm in Enid, Oklahoma, and I'm like, why is the Pentagon calling for me? So I walk in, I'm like, hello, it's Captain Darger. And they're like, oh, it's so-and-so, Major so-and-so. Hey, we're just looking at your fighter bomber crossflow packet, and we didn't see an F-117 on your list. And I go, I didn't know that was an option. The guy's like, well, if we gave you one, would you fly it? And I'm like sitting there on the phone in this office. I just come back from some new pilot flight doing like 15 loops or something. And I'm like, sure. And the guy goes, well, thank you very much. And I go, whoa, wait. And he goes, what? And I said, did I get one? And he goes, we'll call you back. And he hung up the phone. 6 weeks later, I found out I got a stealth fighter. And it was really cool. Someone's asked me about it today. Ewan interviewed me earlier today. And the other reason I say it's really cool is there's such a small number of people that flew it, no 2-seat versions. They gave us numbers. And when they gave me my bandit number, the night after I soloed, we went into a bar in our training squadron, the 7th Fighter Squadron. And again, this was when the airplane was roughly 15, 16 years old. And they said, hey, we're going to give you your bandit number. They said there's been more people in space than have taken off in a stealth fighter and piloted a stealth fighter. And this weekend, with 1,600 NFL players, whatever it is, 52 times 32 teams, put on NFL jerseys, you're the 378th guy that's been in the stealth fighter. There's going to be 1,600 people play football this week. And that's stuck with me to this day, and it's stunning to me. So thanks for your question. Really cool. I'm going to cover 2 topics really quick just because I have to, because it blows my mind. The first one, remember I said we were going to talk about teamwork? And I'm going to do this quick because it's a single slide. So to take a stealth fighter and be stealthy and go ripping into Belgrade, hey, by the way, we could have done this. So that's what you wear when you're sitting at your kitchen table for 13.9 hours. That's hot. And I don't mean hot like in it looks cool. It's warm. So, teamwork. We would launch 8 stealth fighters to go into downtown Belgrade. Other airplanes couldn't go there. People are like, oh, your stealth fighter pilot's really cool, single-seat airplane, you go there by yourself. Not even close. Not even close. We had people that would build our routes for an entire 24-hour period, those routes for us to avoid things. There'd be people that give us a weather brief. There'd be intel officers that would talk to us about threats. While I was sleeping at night, there were people fixing the jets. There were people fueling the jets. There were armament people that were doing these bombs, loading them onto the airplane. Get in the airplane, the control tower would be covering all these airplanes, F-16s taking off, F-15s, stealth fighters in the middle of the night. As soon as we got over the Adriatic, we needed gas. So the bottom left-hand corner, there'd always be tankers waiting for us. But we wouldn't just refuel, because to get 8 stealth fighters into downtown Belgrade, the 4 F-16 CJs that shot missiles at active radar systems, they would get gas with us. The 4 F-15s, 2 in each corner of the city that would protect us from air-to-air threats, they would get gas. And then the 4 Marine Corps EA-6B Prowlers, jammers, they would get gas. And then we would have our big brother in the AWACS plane in the upper left-hand corner, which was a flying control tower coordinating the air war with all these people in the back. All of those people did all of those things to get 8 of these airplanes into a city and drop 16 bombs. And so it's not about a single airplane. It's not about a single seat airplane. It's not about a single person. It's about the most incredible teamwork that would start months, and in the case of individual mission, at least more than 24 hours in advance to get people in the air. And then this is the topic that I'm going to kind of end on. Does anyone want to guess why I have 1975 to 1988? No, I'm sorry, you got one already. Go ahead.
Is that the time frame that the F-117 was in production and the whole kind of scheme of things?
100%. That's exactly right. So remember I said 1975 is when somebody got the idea. 1988 is when the Secretary of Defense came out and said, hey, yeah. He held up a really fuzzy picture and said, stealth fighter. Everybody's like, what? So for 13 years, we designed the airplane. It was approved in Congress. We took parts from all these different airplanes. We didn't talk about this, but Skunk Works is in Burbank, California. You guys aren't Californians, you're from Michigan. Burbank is LA. Okay, thank you. One non-Michigan person here, thank you. But Burbank, okay, there you go. So Burbank is like being in LA. They built almost all of these airplanes, because remember the last ones were finished in 1990, but by 1998 they built like 50 of them. They built them all in secret. In the middle of the night, they'd take them out in LA, load them in the back of other airplanes, and then fly them up to Tonopah, that place we were talking about where you had to leave your family and do that. And in Tonopah, they had cooks, they had people driving trucks, they had people refueling the airplane, they had people in the control tower. No one knew for 13 years, and I don't know how many people touched that program, but if you made me guess over the course of 13 years, it had to have been somewhere in between 50 and 100,000 people. And you know why that makes me happy? Because I can't imagine what we have right now, right? I mean, if we could do that then, I can't imagine what we have right now. I don't know where we keep it, but it'd be pretty cool. And then the last thing that I was going to say is we retired the stealth fighter in 2008, so it's actually the last slide. And Troy, I'm done. But they retired the stealth fighter in 2008. But does anybody know what these airplanes are? You know what the airplanes are on the right? F-15s, but we have flown against F-35. So F-15s on the right, and then on the left, those are F-35s. So this is the newest fighter that we have in the Air Force. And these pictures were posted on Instagram in the last month because we retired these airplanes in 2008, flown back to Tonopah, where Troy went up and collected this one. But for some reason, they're now flying them again, and I think that they're using them to test some of our newest fighters to check what it's like to fly against a stealth airplane. But anyway, it's really cool because the program was essentially dead in 2008. Here we sit 14 years later, and there are multiple stealth fighters that are out there flying today. So I hope you all enjoyed your night. I want to say this, I will be here for as long as you are here, and I will answer any and every question that you have about this airplane or about being in one. And if you don't take anything from this, take that, I guess, second to last topic about teamwork. It doesn't take a person, it doesn't take an airplane, it takes a ton of people and a ton of teamwork. Before I go tonight, thank you to everyone at the Air Museum. Especially thank you to Dick Klass. He's sitting on the end right there. You should stand up. He's the person whose voice that you heard the whole time. He deserves that round of applause. But it's just been an absolute pleasure to be with you tonight, so I hope you enjoyed your time. I hope you learned something. Like I said, I'll be here as long as you're here. Thanks a lot.
So, in fact, thank you, Thad, for hanging around. That was an amazing presentation, and Dick is going to be hanging around. Our restoration team will be here. If you have any questions of them, they will be so thrilled to give you a tour around the aircraft as well. So, enjoy your night. I mean, we could not have had a better night, except I will say that was the first time I have ever seen an aircraft come up on that ramp over there. So, that was oddly perfect timing, just so you know. That was all for you, apparently. So, thank you all very much for all of your support of the Air Zoo and our community.